This is an NJN News special report. Governor Christie's State of the State speech.
Hello, I'm Jim Hooker, and welcome to NJN's rebroadcast of Governor Christie's State of the State speech. Earlier today, the governor presented his address before a joint session of the legislature in Trenton.
Thank you. Before we begin, I'd ask you all to just rise for a moment. We had an extraordinary tragedy this past week, an attack on public life in America. And I'd ask us to just take a moment of silent prayer for the recovery of Congresswoman Giffords and the other victims, and also for the family and friends of those whose lives were lost, including a native of New Jersey. Just take a moment of silent reflection and prayer for their recovery and to help them through their grief. Thank you all very much. Lieutenant Governor Guadagno, Madam Speaker, Mr. President, members of the legislature, and the citizens of the state of New Jersey. It is my constitutional duty to report to each of you on the year that has passed and the state of our state. And today, it is my privilege to report to you that the state of our state is improving, getting better every day. Why do I say that? State spending is down 9% in 1 year. The budget has been balanced. State taxes are lower for the first time in a decade. The unemployment rate has begun to drop, and today is below, not above, the national average. Companies are beginning to take a second look at New Jersey. Together, we have begun to do something no one thought was possible. We are turning our state around. Without a doubt, though, there is much work still to be done, but we cannot turn back now. Make no mistake, New Jersey is coming back. Think of where we were just 1 year ago. The fiscal year 10 budget was over $2 billion in deficit, with the year more than half gone and our options shrinking fast. The state was actually in danger of running out of cash within weeks of not being able to meet payroll. We faced a deficit for fiscal year 11 that was projected to be $11 billion, equal to 37% of the budget, the largest deficit in proportional terms in the country. Property taxes had risen 70% in the last 10 years. Independent analysts concluded we had the highest overall tax burden in America. Unemployment was at 10%, the highest in a generation, the highest in the region, and above the national average. Wealth and jobs and people were leaving the state. The New Jersey we love, the New Jersey of our youth, was in danger of slipping away. Some were beginning to write off New Jersey, doubting we could change what the newspapers called our old hidebound ways. Back then, the state's largest newspaper opined taxes are too high as it is. Another paper put it simply, New Jersey must change course. The day of reckoning had arrived, and arrived with a vengeance. We had a clear choice, to continue our reckless ways or change course and choose a new, difficult path, one that would require real political courage from all those who embrace the change. Well, we did change course decisively. Today, step by step, we are putting ourselves on a better, more sustainable path and pushing ahead on the road to growth. Step one was to turn Trenton upside down, to reverse the pattern of increased spending and taxing, to upend the culture of burying problems instead of facing them. You see, the right answer is to face big problems now or face bigger ones tomorrow. I believe in a culture of truth. And it hasn't always been easy because some of those truths in front of us were not pleasant. But at the same time, everyone knew that the old direction was driving our state off a cliff into the abyss of no growth, high unemployment, and a fleeing population. But we did begin by turning the mindset of Trenton around, and today, with your help, New Jersey's comeback has begun. The last year may have seemed like a long and winding road, but together, we have actually changed direction quickly. Look at what's happened in just the last 12 months. Within 3 weeks of taking office, we took immediate action to prevent a financial crisis and stabilize the state's finances. We balanced that fiscal year 10 budget by holding back what spending could be stopped and averted New Jersey's cash crisis. We enacted the first steps in reforming our system of pensions and benefits, saving state and local taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. We enacted legislation to head off the looming crisis in our unemployment insurance system, preventing a tax increase of as much as $700 per employee for many employers. We made a down payment, with unanimous support in the legislature, by the way, on an education reform package which created a permanent inter-district public school choice program. And we approved 6 new charter schools in New Jersey, a small first step, but with many more to come, and soon. We passed the fiscal 11 budget, which restored some sense of fiscal sanity. It required spending cuts from every department of state government. But we closed that $11 billion budget gap, and we closed it without raising taxes on the people of New Jersey. Most importantly, we took action on the problem which the people of New Jersey have been crying out for us to solve, the growth of their property taxes. We capped that growth at 2% per year. Then we made the cap real by limiting interest arbitration awards to 2% as well. And in 1 year, New Jersey has gone from being a basket case to being a national model. Those same newspapers who thought we were in deep trouble are now telling a very different story. One said we have taken the first step in a very new direction. And another now says New Jersey is setting a national example. So make no mistake, other states are watching what we do here. Will we turn back because the road is too hard? Or will we press on because the future is too important? New Jersey is getting recognized for taking on the tough issues that other politicians have refused to touch. We are showing other states that sometimes to create real change, you've got to go all in, show a little Jersey attitude. And this month, new governors are taking office across the country, Republicans and Democrats, using New Jersey as the example of how they want to lead. The stakes are high. For example, one state, Illinois, has chosen a very different path than ours. They're in the throes of debating a 75% increase in income tax rates. Is that what we want for New Jersey? No. New Jersey intends to remain the leader, not only in turning around the national trend of out-of-control spending and taxes, but in finding the path to growth. So on every one of these topics, we have more and bigger things to do. We need to balance the budget again. We need to put the unemployment insurance fund on a long-term, sustainable path. We need much bigger and bolder education reform. And we need steps to save our pension system. And we need to enact the entire toolkit, which will help us stem the growth of property taxes. So, have no doubt, we are not turning back, not on my watch. But before I turn to the future, to the task ahead, I want to make two comments. First, who would have thunk it? You know, if I or the Senate President or the Speaker had told you a year ago that by December we would have a 2% hard cap on property taxes and a 2% hard cap on interest arbitration awards, you would have told all three of us we were crazy. Yet here we are, with both caps in law. How did this happen? People stood up for their principles on the one hand, but listened to the people who sent us here on the other. That is the model for the way forward. We must fight hard for what we believe in, but in the end, we must do the people's work. My second comment is to say to this legislature and to the public watching or listening today, thank you. We haven't always agreed. And we haven't always gotten exactly what we've wanted. But we have achieved compromise. And the people of New Jersey are better off as a result. 1 year ago, at my inauguration, I invited the Senate President and the Speaker to engage in a symbolic handshake of cooperation, a commitment to worry less about who's getting credit and more about doing something worth getting credit for. Today, I want to thank Steve Sweeney and Sheila Oliver for using this last year of action to help begin to restore the public's faith in bipartisan government. Thank you both. Now, the change we're working to achieve for New Jersey is transformational. So far, we have changed the terms of the debate. You know, a lot has changed when the people of the state vote down a record number of school budgets, even though 70% of the money in school elections was spent by the teachers union, advocating even higher spending. You know the debate has changed when my friends across the aisle propose legislation and adopt legislation, highlighting the need for tax cuts to stimulate economic growth. A year ago, they were advocating tax increases. You know our direction has changed when the teachers union starts talking about tenure reform. And you know the world has changed when we can come together and actually begin to reform the pension and benefit system in a nearly unanimous vote last March. So there can be no question, the debate in Trenton has changed. We have turned Trenton upside down. But now we can't be content. We must take the next step. We must make even bigger changes in the year ahead if New Jersey is to be a place where families choose to live and work and can afford to live and work. You know, it's traditional in the State of the State messages to provide a long list of initiatives for the year ahead, to touch on every plan for every department of state government. It'll come as no shock to all of you that today I'm going to break with that tradition. I want to highlight not the small things, but the major challenges that our state has ignored for too long and that we must confront now. For New Jersey, it is time to do the big things. For this year, the biggest things fall in three categories. One, we must stick to the course of fiscal discipline. Two, we must fix our pension and health benefit systems in order to save them. And three, we must reform our schools to make them the best in America. Now, on these three, what is at stake is no less than the future of New Jersey. As you see, we are in a global competition, and you know we are in a competition among the states. And if we can't shed regulations, reduce spending, and hold the line on taxes, we cannot attract and create the jobs our citizens so desperately need. If we cannot make the promises of our pension system more realistic, there will be no pensions for those who have earned them. And if we cannot repair our schools, our people will not be ready for the jobs of the future. So our work, ladies and gentlemen, is far from finished. And here's where we must go in 2011 on the big things, the things that really matter. First, we must continue the process of getting our fiscal house in order. We did achieve balance in fiscal year 2011, but our long-term deficit problem is far from solved. It took years, indeed decades, to build it up, so it cannot be solved in 1 year. So let's be clear. We cannot continue to spend money we don't have. We cannot print money, and we cannot run deficits. So we have to continue to make some very tough decisions about what we can afford and what we can't. Next month, I'll present to you my budget for fiscal year 2012, and I'll guarantee you this: it will be balanced, and it will not raise taxes. Now, in order for that to be true, though, we need to better control our Medicaid and health care costs. We need to continue to examine the amount and structure of municipal and school aid programs. And we need every department of state government to start from the bottom up and plan not what they want to cut from last year, but to advocate only what they absolutely must fund for this year. When I talk of controlling spending, I'm doing it for a reason. I'm not proposing to cut spending just for cutting's sake. I'm fighting this fight because we have to be truthful about what we can't afford, whether it is health and pension benefits, which are out of line with the rest of the country, or a tunnel, which we simply can't pay for. I'm asking for shared sacrifice so that when we leave here, New Jersey will be more fiscally sound than when we got here. I'm asking for shared sacrifice in cutting what we don't need so that we can invest in what we absolutely do need. Last week, former Governor Kane submitted the report of his Commission on Higher Education, in which he made clear that our system of colleges and universities are essential to our economic growth. Governor Kane was right, and I thank him for his Commission's report. I also last week outlined needed plans for continuing to invest in New Jersey's transportation infrastructure, which we need to be world-class for both jobs and competitiveness. But if we are to fund these investments in the future, we have to control the costs in other programs. We need to make cuts in programs that have been shown not to work in order to make investments that will build a more productive tomorrow. Some people say that getting spending under control and reforming the budget is the third rail of politics. Well, I'm here to tell you that I'm not afraid to touch it. In fact, I embrace it. Because it's been said, opportunity expands in proportion to one's courage. So I'm asking you to join me in cutting the popular in order to fund the necessary. And I'll go further than that. It is one thing just to say no to higher taxes after decades of tax increases, 115 in the last 10 years alone. If New Jersey is to truly become a home for growth, we need to reform the taxes we place on business and individuals, and we need to begin to roll them back. So we need comprehensive tax reform, and by that I mean changes that are considered together, not in a piecemeal approach. In my budget next month, I will propose the initial installment of such a package. But let's be clear, we will not put in place tax cuts that we cannot pay for. Any economic incentive package that I will sign will be enacted in that context, and only in that context, the context of a constitutionally balanced budget. The second big issue we must tackle this year is our antiquated and unsustainable pension and benefit system. This cloud hangs over us and almost every other state in the Union. It is one of the reasons New Jerseyans pay the highest property taxes in America. Nearly 75%, 3 out of every $4 of our state's municipal and county budgets are driven by personnel and labor costs. Without reform, pension and health care benefits will increase by more than 40% in their cost over the next 4 years. Without reform, the unfunded liability of our pension system will grow from $54 billion today to a staggering $183 billion within 30 years. Without reform, the required annual pension contribution by the state will grow to over $13 billion a year over that same time period. Let's just put that in perspective for a second. $13 billion a year. That's more than the state now spends each year on its entire system of public education in pension and benefit costs. The choice is clear: reform today or risk disaster tomorrow. Without reform, the beneficiaries of the system face a high risk of catastrophe, which would place all of their benefits at risk. So again, I'm not proposing pension and benefit reform just to be tight-fisted. I'm proposing pension reform for the police officers who have served and contributed for many years, but who may find nothing when they retire a decade from now. I'm proposing pension reform for the firefighters, who every day put their lives on the line to serve the public, and who have the right to expect that when the time comes, the public will serve them. I'm proposing pension reform for the teachers, who put in the extra hours every day to help their students. We now must put in the extra hours to ensure the system is solvent for them. The pension and benefit reforms I put forward are simple, they're straightforward, and they're sensible. We must modestly raise the retirement age in an era of longer life expectancy. We must curb the effect of COLAs in a time of low or no inflation. We must ensure a modest but acceptable contribution from employees towards their own retirement system. And finally, if we can make real reform a reality, the state must also begin to make its pension contributions. Without reform, the problem we face is simple. Benefits are too rich, contributions are too small, and the system is on a path to bankruptcy. A recent independent study found that the pension funds of 11 states will be out of money by 2020, just 9 years from today. New Jersey is one of those states. That is an unacceptable outcome to me. So to every beneficiary of the system, I am fighting for your pension's existence. And to the members of the legislature, I say, please join me in doing so. Now, As a part of our negotiation on interest arbitration, the leadership of the legislature promised to take up this necessary package of pension and benefit reforms. Now is the time for us to finish what we started last March. We should pass this package now, and if you do, I will immediately sign it into law. The third critical action item for this year, perhaps the biggest thing of all for the future of our state, is education reform. We cannot ask children and families stuck in chronically failing public schools to wait any longer. It is not acceptable that a child who is neglected in a New Jersey school must accept it because of their zip code. We must give parents and children a choice to attend better schools. Now, why do I say this? Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, as United States Attorney, I visited the Robert Treat Academy in Newark. Like those in many charter schools, the slots in this charter school, because it's been so successful, and because we do not have enough charter schools, are limited. So the slots are allocated by lottery. Near the end of my visit, I asked a mother of one of the students how she felt on the night her son was in the lottery. The way she framed the issue was so simple and in so many ways tragic. She told me whether her son was chosen for the lottery meant the difference between him going to college or going to jail. That's what she believed. Over 100,000 students just like that one are trapped in nearly 200 failing public schools in this state. This is an awful situation. It is obscene. It is unacceptable in New Jersey, and we must change it now. You know, we made some progress this year with the interdistrict choice bill, with the expansion of charter schools, and with Mark Zuckerberg's landmark $100 million gift to the city of Newark. I want to thank Mr. Zuckerberg, and I look forward to continuing my work with Mayor Cory Booker, who's with us today, to reform Newark schools. We've got work to do, Cory. But we need to tell those children and their families trapped in these failing schools that we are coming. So, before this legislature goes home for the political season, we need to give them more help toward improvement, more hope, and more choice. Our commitment to these principles is why I have asked, and I am honored to have, my friend, former D.C. Schools Chancellor Michelle Rhee in the chamber today, sitting with Mary Pat. No one in America has been more clear that we must change our public education system from one that caters to the feelings of adults to one that prepares our children for the 21st century. Michelle, thanks for coming today. And I want you to count New Jersey among those who, like you, are finally putting students first. Thank you, Michelle. We have work to do. We must expand the charter school program beyond the 6 we approved this year and the 73 that are operating in New Jersey. That's a top priority. I'm ready to work with you, the members of the legislature, to attract the best charter school operators in America to New Jersey, to increase our authorizing capacity so they can start more charter schools here, to implement the interdistrict school choice law we passed last year, and to send help now to these children and their families in failing schools by finally passing the Bipartisan Opportunity Scholarship Act without any further delay. Overall, statewide per pupil spending in New Jersey is the highest in the nation, at over $17,600 per student. But our results, in terms of achievement, are not number one, and they are not uniformly excellent, or in many cases, even acceptable. In multiple categories and at multiple grade levels, the gap between at-risk students and those not at risk has changed little in years. It is way too high. Now, we must end the myth that more money equals better achievement. It is a failed legal theory, and we can no longer waste our children's time or the public's money waiting for it to work. We're running out of time. We are running out of time. The time for real reform is now. So here's what we have to do. First, we must empower principals. Second, we must reform poor-performing public schools, or we must close them. We must cut out of classroom costs and focus our efforts on teachers and children. I propose that we reward the best teachers based on merit at the individual teacher level. I demand that layoffs, when they occur, be based on a merit system and not merely on seniority. I'm committed to improving the measurement and evaluation of teachers, and I have an expert task force of teachers, principals, and administrators working on that issue right now. And perhaps the most important step in that process is to give schools more power to remove underperforming teachers. The time for a national conversation on tenure is long past due. Teaching can no longer be the only profession where you have no rewards for excellence and no consequences for failure. Let New Jersey lead the way again. The time to eliminate teacher tenure is now. Now, let's be frank, the issues I've highlighted today are difficult. The process of cutting the budget, of being realistic about pension and health benefits, and of reforming our schools. Those tasks are going to get harder before the results make them seem easy. No doubt, in the months ahead, we'll have to fight. Some might even say that I've been too ready for a fight, that my approach has been too tough or too combative. I've heard that somewhere. Let me explain it to you, though. It's for a reason. It's because the fight is important. It's vital. The reality is, I'll fight when it matters. It matters because I've seen what so many New Jersey families are dealing with every day. For them, this is not about politics. This is about their life. I fight when the issues are big, when it matters the most. Sometimes that means we won't agree. Sometimes you'll oppose my proposals, and sometimes I'll oppose yours. Sometimes I might even veto one of your bills. But when I do so, rest assured, it'll be because I genuinely believe it's in the best interest of the people of New Jersey. 150 years ago, after his election and before his inauguration, Abraham Lincoln spoke here, in this building, in the State House in Trenton. On that day, speaking to a legislature controlled by the other party, Lincoln said this: "It may be necessary to put the foot down firmly, and if I do my duty and do right, you will sustain me, will you not? Received as I am by the members of a legislature, the majority of whom do not agree with me in political sentiments, I trust that I may have their assistance in piloting the ship of state through this voyage, surrounded by perils as it is. For if it should suffer attack now, there will be no pilot ever needed for another voyage." Our challenges are different today, but our resolve must be the same. Because then, as now, what is at stake is our future. 22 years ago, another American leader spoke to his people. Famously, he was about big things. He focused on major change in the direction of the country. It was President Ronald Reagan, one of my personal heroes. And on this day, in 1989, he gave his farewell address to the nation. He talked about America standing for freedom, not for the first time, but rediscovering it. Let me tell you, that's what's going on in New Jersey right now. We're rediscovering it. We don't have to reinvent our state. We already have a diverse and highly educated workforce, a phenomenal base of infrastructure, and a state with physical beauty and tremendous talent. Today, we in New Jersey must rediscover our strengths and put them to work on behalf of our people. Reagan also pointed out in that speech that once you begin a great movement, there's no telling where it will end. In the last year, we have begun a new movement in New Jersey, a movement back to our roots, back to economic dynamism and growth, back to pride in our state. Now, we cannot say today where it will lead and all that will come of it. But we know that the path of change is better than the path of stagnation that we were on. I was determined when I took the oath of this office to give the people an honest assessment of our problems, to tell them the truth, even if it was difficult, and my proposed solutions were at times unpopular. And to this day, I ask that I be measured by that standard. I will always do what I said I was going to do. I may not offer the easiest course, but I will be direct in saying which course I believe is best. Our nation and our state face major challenges ahead. But those of us entrusted to serve the public have the chance to stand up and fight for what really needs to be done at this critical time in our history. So today, we cannot turn back. We owe it to the people of New Jersey to press on, to fight hard when it really matters, and to work every day to create a real hope for a brighter future. For just as President Reagan spoke of America as a shining city on a hill, I believe New Jersey can once again be a beacon, a national leader in everything from economic growth to education, and a wonderful place to prosper, to run a business, and raise a family. And my commitment to you today is to fight alongside each and every one of you to make it so. Thank you. God bless New Jersey, and God bless America.
Hello, I'm Jim Hooker. You've been watching a rebroadcast of Governor Christie's State of the State speech from earlier today. Now, after the governor finished his address, NJN presented the Democratic response to the governor's speech. That part of our program was hosted by NJN News senior political correspondent Michael Aron.
Jim, after every State of the State address, we present a Democratic response. This year, we're joined by two of the leaders of the two houses, Senator Paul Sarlo of Woodridge in Bergen County, Assembly Majority Leader Joe Cryan of Union in Union County. Senator Sarlo is chairman of the Budget Committee. What did you think of the speech?
Well, the governor talks about today cutting the popular to fund the necessary. And what I'm concerned about in this governor's New Jersey, the popular is the hardworking families, the middle class of New Jersey, those who care about their children's education. So I think we just need to define what he's talking about when he says cutting the popular to fund the necessary. Is funding the necessary, the higher income earned people, the wealthier.
What did you think?
I was surprised by his tone and what he did, because I thought that his vision, Chris Christie's New Jersey, was a different New Jersey than I think a lot of middle-class working people in New Jersey are actually experiencing. I was surprised when he talked about, for example, in his 3 themes. In education, he talked about tenure reform and things like that, but didn't mention the fact that his cuts to education had actually decimated. He had attacked teachers. He had problems with the charter schools, race to the top issue. I thought that
You didn't expect him to bring up his problems, did you?
Well, you know what? I thought it would have been nice to see a guy who says he's so full of candor, as he mentioned more than once, as I'm paraphrasing, to actually deal with real issues. He talked about fiscal discipline in the state budget and how he was going to perform that, yet there's a $10.5 billion hole this year because he didn't pay any of the bills. He talked about pension reform, but yet once again he didn't pay any of the bills. I thought Chris Christie's New Jersey was a different New Jersey than a lot of folks actually than he sees. I think his is a real attack on working class families. I think it's an issue in unemployment. I think it's an issue in property taxes. I think in education he's simply off base.
He said that the state of the state is improving. Would you give him that much?
Well, I don't know about him, but if you went into any member of the legislative district, all 120 members here today, and asked the people who live in their districts, are you better off today than you were a year ago? And I think you're going to find a much different answer. People are struggling out there. They're scared. Unemployment is still at 9%. This governor has not done anything to deal with the job issues. We have provided him with 30 pieces of legislation that talks about some of the incentives, some of the tax.
He said he hinted today that he's going to veto some of that legislation because it's not part of the budget. It has to be seen in the context of the budget. It can't be done piecemeal.
Well, people are concerned out there, and they want to hear from us what we're doing to give them an incentive to go back to work.
But those things cost money, do they not?
Some of them do, but you need to invest. You need to put people back to work today to begin to grow this economy. And unfortunately, this governor has not done that. He's also, as Joe said, has decimated public education. People are concerned in our legislative districts, and I don't know if they believe what he's saying there today, especially the middle class and the hardworking families, that this state is better off today than it was yesterday.
How would you not decimate public education if you were in his shoes?
Well, I tell you what, one of the things, Michael, for example, is he offers expanded charter schools. 28 of the actual close to 70 charter schools in this state are actually failing at average yearly progress. It's not an example he uses. I want to make the system work better for what it is. I don't think we should divide and destroy teachers and attack their profession every chance we get. Actually, I don't think we should tear down this state the way this governor does repeatedly as well.
He had a lot of Jersey pride in that speech, did he not?
I thought it was the most optimistic I've seen him. Normally, which I find to be a complete absence of leadership, he tears down this state every chance he gets. But that being said, I still think his focuses were wrong. As Paul mentioned, unemployment is the issue in the state and the economy. There's 30 bills there, sign them and move on. Let's talk about getting people back to work in the right way. Let's talk about pension reforms. He never mentioned the Democratic opportunity there for pension reform.
Well, I'm sorry. He never mentioned what?
We offered an alternative as well, and I hope we work in a bipartisan manner to that. He never mentioned, for fact, women's health care, which he didn't touch upon, and he cut out of this year's budget. Never talked about what I thought were real issues for New Jerseyans. Back to work, affordability he mentioned, but he never mentioned it in the context of property tax hikes. Look, what he did is he made every New Jerseyan in the past year pay more and get less.
He said that his governorship has changed the culture in Trenton, and now Trenton has been turned upside down. What do you make of that statement?
A lot of that has been just passed on to the local taxpayer, to the local property taxpayer. We are facing another storm here in New Jersey. I know there are many mayors and councils sitting back in their respective borough halls this evening trying to figure out how they're going to clear the snow. Where's the money going to come from to clear the snow to make sure the first responders could get out there? They're concerned about the budget that needs to be struck and what kind of other services they're going to have to cut. They feel New Jersey, the state government has turned their back on them. They're doing a lot more with less. They are sharing the services. They're doing what they have to do. Are there cases where people are not following every step of the way? But in most instances, the municipalities across the state are struggling. And the governor cannot continue to balance his budget on the backs of the local property taxpayer.
So he should hike taxes at the state level?
I'm not saying he has to do that, but he needs to come up with his priorities here. And his priorities seem to be a different class. It seems to be he's very concerned about getting the state's fiscal house in order, but nothing to do to help the local property taxpayer. We are looking at property tax increases next year.
What do you say about the change in the culture that he sees and maybe you don't see?
Okay, well, first off, fair is fair. I think Chris Christie's been decisive and put his own imprint on being governor and his own view of the state. I think that's very clear. But I think his vision in New Jersey, Chris Christie's New Jersey, is different than the working class people of New Jersey. I think, for example, he talked about tax cuts today. We've heard him fight for example, this year millionaires got a tax break. Senior citizens, for example, didn't get their rebates. Poor, middle class and working class people of the state took a tax hike because they didn't get their earned income tax credit that he cut out of the budget. So his vision and what he sees from New Jersey, I think, is very different than the person on the street. A parent who's paying more for their child to participate in high school sports, or more importantly, even participate in a high school lab after school. Those are his visions of New Jersey. They're not ours.
He hinted that he's going to call for more tax cuts in the budget message. He said he was. He said we need comprehensive tax reform. Are you open to more tax cutting?
We are open to any suggestion because we're not him. We don't dismiss things out of hand. But the reality is that trickle-down economics hasn't worked in this country. It hasn't worked in this state. The issue in this state, again, let's go back to it. It's the economy. It's unemployment. If he wants to put another tax cut out there for millionaires while the rest of us wait for it to trickle on down, that's poor public policy.
Michael, I'm glad the governor did recognize today some of the accomplishments this year were done in a bipartisan manner. He needed the Democratic legislature, and we did it. And I'm glad he did recognize it wasn't just about him. It was us working together with him. The early pension reforms that were done in early March, the 2% cap, giving him the necessary votes to balance the budget so we didn't put people out of work and shut down the state of government. Most of the measures that he's accomplished here was done with Democratic support and Democratic work because we want to work with him. But I think we need to tone down the rhetoric going forward.
This was a slightly toned down speech, was it not?
And I'll give him that much credit.
I wonder if Arizona had anything to do with that, or whether he's just ready to be a different governor in year 2 than he was in year 1.
I don't think Arizona should have weigh into this at all. He did tone the message down a little bit, but I think he's going to realize he needs us going forward, and he wasn't able to accomplish.
He did acknowledge that too. There was a serious call for bipartisanship in this speech.
I also think he's hearing it from the everyday people. You need to tone the rhetoric down. I'm sure his polling is showing that he needs to turn back the rhetoric.
You wanted to say something.
That's what I wanted to mention. I think his polling has as much to do with that. He's as political as any governor in history, and I'm sure his message of the fact that he's perceived as such a bully, and which he seems to enjoy, which intimidates women, which intimidates a variety of factions, which intimidates a whole lot of people in this state, is not a perceived sense of leadership. And I think he changed his tone today. Good for him if he did. We want to accomplish things moving forward, what's in the best interest of the state.
We want to work with him. We just need to turn back the rhetoric.
The pension and benefit reforms that he talked about, he didn't detail. Oh, yes, he did. Raise the retirement age, get more of a contribution out of workers. We're trying to save workers' pensions, not get rid of them, not attack them. Are you open to that approach?
Well, I think Senate President Sweeney and Speaker Oliver have laid out a foundation and a framework for an alternative way to reform the pension system and save the pension system. But this governor also has to recognize he has no commitment at this point in time to make a pension payment. He keeps moving the ball down the field saying we make an initial set of reforms, and then he doesn't make a pension payment.
He said today, he's
been saying that now for a year.
Okay, he said if we get the reforms I'm looking for, the state will start making its contribution. What do you make of that?
Make the payment, and we will continue to work with him.
What do you make?
He's got a constitutional requirement by law to make a payment. We want to see him do so in the budget address, and yet we want to be positive and working forward. We've presented a series of proposals through our leadership, which does some of the things that the governor mentioned today, but I certainly hope that he wants to work like an interest arbitration, where you can find a way for a bipartisan as opposed to his rhetoric. Most importantly, he's got to put up or shut up with the money.
Well, there's $3 billion that should go into the pension system from the state budget. and the state could barely afford anything. It put nothing in last year. Where is the money to come from?
Well, Michael, if I can, constitutionally through the law that we passed last year and he signed, he's got an obligation to pay 1/7 of that, a little over $500 million. The proposals that we put forward, which includes some of the scale backs of 1% of some of the benefits that were given, will actually reduce that $3 billion requirement. We agree. We want to pay as you go as well, and we've offered the opportunity to do that, as well as move the pension funds away from state management, put them more into the union hands, which seems to make a lot of sense under Taft-Hartley and in federal law. And we think it's a good proposal. We hope it gets serious consideration.
Where are you at on the pension reform direction that he charted today?
No, I believe the foundation and the framework that has been laid out by the Senate President and the Speaker is a good way to start. It has worked in other states.
They put out a plan last Friday, late Friday afternoon. I don't know why they put it out on Friday at 4 o'clock when it was going to get no attention, instead of holding a real press conference and unveiling their proposals. That's just a kind of inside thing that perplexes me. Any enlightenment on that one?
Were you around? Were you home early on Friday?
Maybe.
Home early on Friday?
Maybe. But they did beat the governor time-wise, I guess, by 3 or 4 days, although he's been calling for this all fall. Every time he's been out on the road at a town hall, pension and benefit reform has been part of the theme.
But Michael, what the governor talked about was pension and health care today. He talked about education and he talked about fiscal discipline. We will also want folks to understand the Democratic message of economic opportunity is sitting on the governor's desk. He needs to focus in. He needs to sign those 30 bills and needs to move forward and giving people opportunity in the state to go back to work.
Is that what was missing from this speech, the jobs focus?
There was he missed the jobs altogether today.
He did say we need a new path to growth. Rhetorically, he was there.
I know two things that are on everybody's mind when I go home tonight in my district. It's going to be about their job, those who currently have a job and those who don't have a job. And they're scared out there. And they're looking for us to show leadership, to find ways to put them back to work here in New Jersey. And they're concerned about their property taxes. They're concerned about their son and daughter's education. Okay? The Democratic leadership team and the Democratic-controlled legislature cares about putting these people back to work. We're very concerned about passing the buck on to the local property taxpayer, and we're cared about decimating public education.
Well, didn't your passage of the 2% cap and his signing of it and that compromise do something to put a damper on the rise in property taxes?
Well, actually, last year, property taxes increased in education almost 20%, or actually, in some cases, even more. So the idea of a cap still needs to be worked through. It's this governor's signature item. That's his issue. He can certainly will work with them as we continue to cap property taxes in the way that they should. But Michael, the reality is that as you talk about jobs, one of the things the governor didn't talk about it too much because there is no program there. Matter of fact, I think the signature Republican item on jobs is the Republican leaders reference the unemployed as these people. Well, these people are working class New Jerseyans who need an opportunity, who want to go to work, and we need to provide them an opportunity.
The governor had Michelle Rhee, the personification of education reform, here as a special guest. He wants merit pay, he wants tenure reform, he wants more charter schools, he wants the Opportunity Scholarship Act passed, which is a sort of backdoor form of vouchers for private schools. What did you think about having Michelle Rhee here to backstop that agenda, or at least to symbolize it?
Well, I think this governor believes in private schools. He believes in the vouchers. He's buying. You
don't?
I've never been a supporter of vouchers. I don't believe
charter schools.
I've supported charter schools in the past, but they're all not working. As my colleague here said, many of them are struggling. You hear about the success stories, but you don't hear about those that are failing and that are actually pulling money away from some of the public schools, especially in some of the suburban areas. I'm very concerned about the voucher program that he's talking about, leaving behind children with no way to get out, just focusing on taking the best children possible out of some of our worst performing schools and leaving the rest of the children behind.
We have 45 seconds left. Did you want to say something real fast on that?
I thought she was a prop for a failed education agenda the first year. And please don't look at what I'm doing. Please look at Michelle Rhee instead. And I thought that was terrible. He's got a failed policy, whether it's Brett Schundler, race to the top, charter school funding. The governor's got a lot of explaining to do on education and a lot of work to do.
Assembly Majority Leader Joe Cryan, Senate Budget Committee Chairman Paul Sarlo, thank you both very much.
Thank you, Michael, for having us.
So this has been the Democratic response to the governor's State of the State message. As it sounds like there's going to be some tension ahead, we'll look to the budget address, the governor's budget address on February 22nd for more details on the year ahead. The governor has decided what he thinks the three big things should be: more fiscal discipline, pension and benefit reform, and serious education reform. We will be here to continue reporting on how it all goes. I'm Michael Aron in the Assembly Chamber. Jim, back to you.
You've been watching NJN's rebroadcast of Governor Christie's State of the State speech and the Democratic response. For more on the governor's speech, stay tuned for NJN News next. I'm Jim Hooker. Thanks for joining us.